is a place where lived experience is taken seriously, because too many people have discovered the more clearly they speak, the worse they're treated. We share personal experience not to give medical advice, but so that when people encounter the kinds of situations we discuss, they're ready to recognize patterns and respond effectively. This show is about language, power, and what happens when systems stop listening and start translating people into problems. If you've ever felt misheard, mislabeled, or punished for staying coherent under pressure, you're in the right place. And I don't know if you got a place to hang a basket, but maybe you could do something like that at some point.
I do
If you
that.
don't have other.
And I thought about where we have the walkway, we've got like this little like patch of near bricks, and I used to have something similar in my old house that I thought I might just plant just a couple flowers just to make it look pretty, up
Yeah,
to the walkway to the front door. So
that's fun. I kind of like bringing life in. It's go start some seeds, get them going, get them
yeah,
outside, and watch them take off. It's fun.
yeah,
My hobby. Anyway,
yeah.
so thanks again for joining me today. I've been enjoying our conversations, and I've been thinking a
Same
lot
here.
this week about what to talk about today, and something's been really kind of hitting me. I've been spending some time over in the X space, and there's a doctor over there that's just going on and on and on about lithium. Can't stop talking about lithium, 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 and he's constantly asking people, "What would you do if you're sitting in front of a severely psychotic patient? What's the alternative?" As if there's no other choice, as if we have no idea how that person arrived at that situation, as if we have no idea what psychotic really even means, especially given the fact that so many of these slurs, as we've discussed, overlap our very real spiritual experiences to the point
Yeah.
where if we were to just sit, and I can pretty much guarantee you, if I take a person like that, if I were to go in their office and just start talking from the time the light beam, poked out on the
Right.
hillside until on, they would probably be wanting to commit me too, because they don't understand what we're talking about until you really sit down and have the kind of dialogue that we've been having. So, and then it got me thinking about how this kind of this fundamental rejection that we've built into society about what we've talked about, which is just basically a crossover point, right?
Yes.
That you've experienced it, I've experienced, countless other people have experienced it, but what we've not really done is say, how do we understand and embrace the pathways, and how do we develop the language that destigmatizes these experiences away from people that just don't have a grip on reality? I know it would be, I can totally see how somebody could slip into a state where they lose discernment,
Hmm.
because of an overwhelming situation that they weren't ready for. I think when you know that this is a possibility, it dramatically would have changed my attitude. Had I known from the time I was put on this place that that crossover point was possible, not only was it possible, but there's different pathways and ways to get there. And, it would have made my life a whole lot easier. And I just think of all the people that are stuck behind that same lie today, that the psych industry is really peddling really, really hard, which is this crossover point is universally framed as a delusion. So all of the language on one side of that event and the other, when you're dealing with somebody who fundamentally rejects the notion that that could even happen, you can't have a dialogue with them. It's impossible. They'll call you crazy because the stuff you're trying to convey, A, doesn't have a language that I think we've at least taken a shot at trying to establish a kind of a
Yeah.
language that gets that going. Um, but the immensity of the event was way beyond anything that I could have expected or set myself up for. But had I known the knowledge that that could happen, that would have made the event way better. I would have been made a lot more progress, and I would have got a lot more healing, I'm convinced. And things, would have been much better for everybody. It's that interventionism, the stopping, the blocking, the not allowing people to talk about it, the drug is the only solution kind of
Yeah.
mentality. Everything's an emergency. I have to control this person right now. What am I going to stick in their veins? And none of that. I think if I would encounter somebody that had in the throes of a spiritual experience, and I think there's a few that I encountered when I was in that locked up place, yeah, I
Yes.
didn't have a problem talking to them.
Right. Well, I think this is too where we have a group of people that are misusing knowledge and an amount of knowledge. Because in my case, I had the past life regression hypnotherapy misused on me, or the quantum healing technique misused on me. So these people were, and bear in mind, this is also covered in the Epstein files, that there have been these consciousness studies. Hopkins is heavily
Mhm.
involved, and they've already gotten in trouble for misusing things with priests and what they're doing over there. Now, the whole story hasn't come out, but I'm going to make sure it comes out, because the other component about that is the folks like myself, and Baltimore is unfortunately a target rich environment, because it's a lot of poor people who have unfortunately been swept up into this false control. Their property has been taken away, their personhood, all of it. It's very, very abusive. And they know that they can strong arm, because, people hear the name Hopkins and they think these folks have prestige. Well, they're not looking at the entire history. Henrietta Lacks, the Guatemala incidents, um, the lead paint stuff, where they were purposely putting children in with the lead paint in order to kind of get things and make the landlords look okay, so the landlords didn't have to do work. Okay, so there's
Mhm.
a lot of history there that's just absolutely unpleasant. And I'm not even going into the night doctors that used to kidnap slaves and do all kinds of experiments on them, as well as the MK Ultra stuff, which they have knowingly been involved in. I've seen the actual paperwork. So yeah, this is
Yeah.
all problematic. The other thing is, they know lithium is poison, so that's real interesting. You're trying to make people eat battery components.
It's
I'm
a heavy
sorry.
metal.
Yeah, they knew before they put it on the market, when it was back in like the 40s, I think. It was being tested in Australia, and they knew most people died. This is why they forced people to get blood tests. It's nothing but a slow poison. And they do know this. They know this. This is what gets me. The other thing about it is this: these folks, just because they've acted with impunity for so damn long, think they can get away with literal murder. And dollars to donuts, a lot of people have had life insurance policies taken out on them that they don't know about. Like I say, my situation was very extreme, but it's happening across Baltimore. I am glad to see that some of this is starting to slowly, bit by bit, come out in the press. Good. I want that. I definitely want that. Having said that, we also have these folks who do have, or who have been misusing sacred knowledge, who have deliberately been trying to manipulate, obscure, and do evil with it and pervert this. Um, that's where they're not wanting to have this information. Why people like us having spiritual awakenings, um, and they want to try and like shoot people, like Sonia Massey, God rest her soul. This is happening in a lot of places. That's why they were trying to set me up. This is why they're trying, because they don't want the truth to come out, but it is coming out. The fact of the
Mhm.
matter is, they already know that God already too about the disclosure with UFOs. So they don't want all this to come out about consciousness. They don't want all this to come out about heaven on earth. They don't want people to realize that this is what has been talked about in Revelations. They don't want regular people like yourself and myself to realize this is almost like a second Passover in many ways. That
Mhm.
we've also had in the past the misuse of computers, the misuse of technologies. All of this stuff has happened in the past. The same thing with another flood. We've had that happen before too. And certainly in the time of Noah, if we're just looking at it biblically, but it's happened in other points in history too. And at this point, God doesn't want civilization to be wiped out. So it's with those of us who have been incarnated at this time, who have been given who have been given the knowledge to use it correctly. So yourself, myself, miracle healings, other things that are just undeniable, no matter how they want to try and mischaracterize it, the truth is coming out. And I think that's where it is very important for those of us who have had multiple death and near death experiences to be able to speak about it. I feel like it's the equivalent of going through a black hole in some ways. So sometimes I think having that scientific language and being able to connect the science and the spirituality and the mechanics of that through quantum and through other means and processes to be able to explain it in a way that's kind of making a little bit more sense to people can also be quite helpful, because that is very grounded and factual. It's not just it's the factual and the actual along with faith, but it's along with doing the right thing. It's along with praying
Hmm.
for healing to happen. It's about being a good, decent, honest person. It's about being authentic. It's about being genuine. It's about being your best self, even in your worst moments. This all counts. It all matters. We are all being called. We are all being tested. And
Right.
and that is really at the point in history where we've been. We've had a lot of this very dark, manipulative energy, and for that to be counteractive, we also have people who have been making the right decisions and wanting to bring back communities and bring back a very person to person where we're actually doing right by one another instead of trying to manipulate and control and steal from other people. And that's what we've had,
Yeah.
that very dark energy for too many decades at this point, truly. And that's why the light had to come back. Light will always conquer darkness. Yes, this is a free will planet. People make bad choices. But the power that's going to be given to people like yourself, myself, other folks with miracle healings, with certain kinds of knowledge and insight that we are able to discuss and really be able to explain to people in a way that it's sensible. It doesn't sound, and to have ourselves not be mischaracterized and mislabeled with slurs and all this stuff. This is why they've been
Right.
leaning so hard on all this forced incarceration. And that's what I call it. It's not hospital. No, it's a torture chamber. It's a concentration camp. You're giving people drugs that are based upon concentration camp drugs. They're
It,
eugenics. They know it. They
yes.
know
I
it.
mean,
Yeah. And that's why it's
it,
up to us to build systems that are workable and things that do help for people to understand they're not alone in this. And I think that that's not only possible, it's doable. And it's also a huge cost saving thing. And to give that stability too, if we're building communities for people to have lateral moves as far as, okay, I might not be able to do HVAC, but I can cook and clean and I can do other things, paperwork, and somebody else might be able to, know how to build things or do repair. And you know what I mean? It's in being able to build a community.
right.
Nothing has to be fancy. Not somebody has to have all of it and somebody else has next to nothing. Because again, we've had that for far too long too.
Right.
It's an imbalance, and when there is such imbalance, it always tips back over. And that's the point where we're at. And I
Yeah.
think folks are running very, very scared at this point because the truth is coming out, and it always does. You
And
know.
I think what's really going to hit us hard is this rush to AI, the calculated
Yes.
intelligence, and really I saw Kevin O'Leary kind of slipped a little bit and talked about everything that AI was going to be inventing. Well, that means that the business model behind this is that everything is going to come pre-patented and pre-copyrighted, and this is the world that's going to be defined for you, and in a way that a handful of people don't have to do anything but just live off the
Yes.
efforts of everybody else. And I can tell you that from these experiences, we don't even understand what intelligence is until we get to the point where we can normalize these kinds of transformative experiences. And we know how to get people to that hump, over that hump, and hopefully staying there so they can be here and there at the same time and really help people a
Yes.
lot. We've got a fight on our hands
Yeah.
because our ethics crisis, we don't want to admit the fact that our ethics crisis is directly tied to our lack of competitiveness crisis and why we keep falling behind and why we're losing creativity, we're losing energy, because people think it's all just something that comes cranking out of a computer, and it's not. That's not what it
Yeah.
is. That isn't where it's come from. But the more stigma that's packed in around the types of experiences. Again, it's what we're saying is that has the effect of keeping people on not trying to improve themselves.
Yes.
I had somebody contact me this week, or they tried a while back, and their message went into spam, but they were asking me a few questions about what I used to write on Quora. And I said, when you understand why Christ was murdered, why it's because the people that did that really were trying to protect their freedom to lie. And if
Yep.
you don't renounce that, wittingly or unwittingly, you're holding a piece of that hate inside yourself, and that is blocking you from more stuff than you can ever imagine that it's
Yes.
blocking you from. And so to help people understand that and how, oh, okay. So I was kind of encouraging that just, if there's anything about this practice you need to understand, it's that break from double-mindedness and then moving off into mental sanity and peacefulness. And it does not at all make you stupid. It does the
No.
opposite. So all these disservices that are being done to society, when you look at the stack up, it's really hurting us. And so again, it's kind of like what we talked about a little bit last week. How calm are we supposed to be while this is going on? You want to have an opinion, great, have an opinion, but you're going to normalize something like that in a courtroom and demean people and basically lie about them, throw due process out the window, through throw informed consent out the window, just be contemptuous of all these fundamental things. Where are we going with it? This never should have happened. Never should have
Right.
happened.
Well, that's why I'm glad, and I really am, that everything that happened to me encompassed catching a multi-state huge fraud ring, identity theft and fraud ring. Now, I don't like what I've been through, so don't get me
Mm,
wrong, but my point has been I don't ever want anyone else to go through it again. I don't ever want to have to go through that again. But
exactly.
what happened was brutal.
No.
Not only did I die multiple times, people cashed in on life insurance policies they had on me. So now all of this is coming to light. And I'm very, very glad because I've been trying to report it for years, at
Mm,
least in increments as I was figuring out what was going on. So it's not as though people didn't have contact with me. It's not as though I wasn't trying to explain the things that I did know at the time that I was going through it. I didn't have the whole picture yet myself, but that was on them for misusing the QHHT. I understand now.
yep.
They didn't want me to. I have a photo of me dead on my phone. They sent it to the relative that sold me. And I know that because, again, this was about buying consciousness. It's about vibration. It's about
Mm,
energy. So all of this is coming into play, and and it's all a big part of it. So I understand it. Had I not taken that walk through literal hell, uh, I wouldn't get it because that's what it really felt like, a protracted hell from the time it started
yep.
all the way through. But I do have to think, and or I actually I know, I deep down I know that it was something that I asked for. I do believe that at least one person got the message through to the right people about what was going on, and I think the right people already knew what was going on, because you always have to think, for every dark energy, for all this group of people doing the wrong thing, there's a group of people doing the right thing. I also have a feeling that my story had moved some people who were doing the wrong thing into realizing, hey, she's the real deal. This is not cool what's happening. And I
Right.
think that helped to promote a sea change too. If this is how I organized for my life to be able to help facilitate these major changes, then I'm very grateful for that. And I don't mean like I'm all egotistical. No, it's a very practical thing. Because I don't want for any more. And even if I have money, I want to put it into build Native American restaurants and Native American food trucks, to put that money back into the tribes so that they have
Yeah.
actual small businesses, and that we're reintroducing the culture in a major way to people who are non-native, and even people native alike that have been separated, forcibly separated from our own culture. It's, you know,
Sure. Yep.
so it's not a, you know, to me, and like I say, it's not an egotistical thing. It's just that I realize now a lot of things, and how that connects with dreams and consciousness. And I understand this in a very deep way. I can go back and read the books and point to the things that people were misusing, the knowledge that people were misusing. Now I know how to use it for good, and that's exactly what it is
Mm,
I'm going to do. Um, and for me, that matters. That's important. Now I can rebuild my life, not just for myself, but to actually be able to help other people do that for themselves. And I have a story to tell that's important, and it is also pointing out all that fraud.
mm,
Because what that is, that's just plain flat out illegal. And it wasn't just happening in Maryland at all. That's where Social Security is based. But these are the same folks. It's tied up with the fraud in California, and it's all through these LLCs. It's all through these other corrupt corporations and these other public-private partnerships.
mm.
And that's all going to be coming to the surface. I'm very, very glad of that. Um, and I
Yeah, I mean,
feel,
profit was really the commodity in healthcare, right? And so
yes,
the patient becomes second, and nowhere is that more important. It's when more evident that when these people get their claws on you and don't let you get away
yes,
from them, that
yes,
that's a terrifying experience because
very,
the abuse is nonstop. You can't explain anything to them. It's judgmental,
yeah,
just a judgmental nature, along with the fact that the spiritual hostility, and they've
yes,
not done anything to mitigate that. And people are routinely called
yeah,
manic or bipolar or
right.
schizophrenic or
It
whatever name they
hides
want to throw
abuse
at them.
also. Yeah, it hides
It
abuse
does.
also. Because
It
that
really
was
does.
again directly the case with me. I didn't realize that he was in with these doctors and nurses, and some of them I don't even think have degrees. Some of them I think have just plain flat out made it up. I think they're just there to poison. Well, they are. Uh, but I didn't realize he was in with all this and supposedly has some sort of. I knew he was like some kind of computer expert. Well, so's the one that sold me, and sold me to him, and and this is all research, and that's how they were
Mm.
kind of getting away with some of what they were doing. And there's dirty cops and that do wellness checks. How many of them are real cops? Beats me. I don't know. I don't really know that I don't even know that that's the important point, to be honest with you. I mean, I think there's dirty cops everywhere. Look, again, we see what happened with
Oh yeah.
Sonia Massey being mislabeled and then just bam, shot right between the eyes when she mentioned Jesus. I mean,
Yep.
so I think that that's really a very important component in this. Not just the mislabeling, but the excuses that they use, because that's what I think they were going to do to me. I know Mr. X was trying to perpetrate one. Well, you had a knife. I said, I didn't have no fucking knife. What are you talking about? Oh, you didn't have a knife? I'm like, no, I didn't have a knife, and you know that, and so does everybody else. I said, I'm not playing this. And, but I think they were setting me up to be shot. That's how you hear a lot of people in Baltimore. In fact, one young autistic man was shot dead recently, and they were claiming he had a knife. I thought, where have I heard this before?
Right.
So excuse me. We're just going to be hearing a lot more about this. And like I said with my ID card, they're always supposed to be good for 8 years. Well, why was mine only good for a year and some change? Because the state knew. Because these folks that were doing the fraud were in on the state. Sante is who handles the state stuff. And WellCare, again, WellCare got busted in Florida, the biggest fraud ever for Medicaid and Medicare, in the billions of dollars. Why? And they were doing it through behavioral health and phony Baker Acts.
Well,
So,
it makes sense that if you're under some kind of guardianship or whatever, and you're kept away from your legal documents and your driver's license, your identification expires.
right.
Well, who's going to renew that? Well, the people who can do that, the people that have guardianship, which is the facility, right? So,
Well,
and
right.
then
And all
there
my
goes,
documents were stolen as well. And my
yeah.
wallet was stolen one time, and my documents were stolen. and so I was already knowing what was going on and was, like I say, really desperately trying to report it. And I mean to the local congressman, I mean to
Hmm.
everybody. I wasn't playing around. I said, this is not okay. And then that's when I was realizing that they had misused the past life regression hypnotherapy. That's when I called UVA. So that was all the way back in 2020.
Right.
So
I
I
just
think
saw a
they
story.
knew
Hmm.
to some degree what Hopkins was up to. And like I say, Hopkins, I didn't know that at the time, was already in trouble that they were misusing things with the consciousness studies. And in 2023 got caught selling medical records to the Russians.
I
So,
just heard a story this week about a woman who I think she lives in California, and the state of Oregon, I believe it was, reached into her bank account and took $20,000 out. And she's like, "Why'd you do that?" And they said, "Well, you lived in Oregon and you owe us, income tax."
Sante
Says,
again.
"I've
That's
never
Sante
been
group
to
again.
Oregon." Right. She's never been there. So what happens? These people, they do this, and then, you get money coming in from an NGO, you get money here, you get money there. I watched a guy interview a homeless person this week who was talking about how he has registered with six, seven, eight different agencies. All those agencies, once they get the signature from him, they get money for him. And he says he
That's it.
gets nothing from any
Bingo.
of them. And this is just going on, and it's covered over with sanctimony, and it's really this assault on the spiritual, I think, that makes it all possible. And
Yeah.
I it's sad. I mean, it's a big enough impact. I almost understand why people have blasphemy laws, because it's really takes this big huge tool out of your toolbox in order to develop yourself and push back against challenges and develop the resoluteness and the resilience and the kind of things that we talk about. Without that tool in your toolbox, there's no way. There's no, because
Right.
what you have to push back against is so immense. But then you find it's easy to do.
Yeah,
So
because when you have that righteous strength, when you have that knowledge, and it's a knowledge, it's not even a get, it's a knowledge. Like the things I know,
yeah.
and I say with gnosis, I know, and nothing, and
Hmm.
it's unshakable, and they know that
Yeah.
this is unshakable with me. So it's not only that they were doing the fraud, it's that they know I'm telling the truth, and you can't
Yeah.
get past that. And it does bring that peace beyond all understanding. It makes so many things make sense. It is about being radically genuine, radically honest with yourself, and to not be afraid of the darkness, to have to walk through
Mhm.
that, to process it, to really have the meaning come at you, and to turn the mind off, allow that to work from your soul and not from your ego, and it makes
Right.
all the difference. And
Hmm.
it is really about being able to then figure out, okay, I can be my best self. I have nothing to be afraid of. I have nothing to be ashamed of. I
Right.
really don't. I don't have to like what happened. On the other hand, that wasn't on me. I was making the right choices at the right time at all turns. That really does fall on the other folks. And
Hmm.
that's evident. And there's
Right.
evidence. And so to me, I am like, okay, I want to be able to build things that are workable, that are positive, that bring jobs back, that bring monetary equality, that allow people to work at the level they can to contribute. I
Hmm.
want all this. This is what I want, because it is really about, here we are, the other 98, 99%. We matter. We matter. And to bring back a little bit about the AI, there's a young woman I saw the other day, and this was on Instagram. She is somebody who has been, writing music and performing music for a few years at this point. Young lady, but still. And somebody had wanted to do a little bit of work with her, or it was a producer, I think, maybe had wanted to work with her. And what she didn't realize was that and she had uploaded her songs onto YouTube, right? And AI grabbed her voice, grabbed her songs, claimed the copyright, and then filed copyright strikes against her for her own music. So that's the point we've gotten to. So
Right.
yeah, this
Yeah.
shit's
Yeah.
real out of control. It's super duper out of control. And
Yeah.
I knew that some of my work had been like scraped and stuff. And because I was seeing it when I would look at my before when I still had a blog, and not even realizing why part of the reason I was having an issue with that was because it all went through here. I thought Mr. X was protecting me from that relative, not realizing that he's the one that sold me to the but you
Right.
don't know what you don't know until you know it. I can't
That's
blame
right.
myself. And I
No.
got it made me mad when people, why were you so stupid? I said, why don't you ask the people who were abusing me why they did that? Why don't you ask that
Right.
question? Don't blame me. I'm autistic. I'm trying to live my life. And I want to think the best of everybody else because I don't
Hmm.
have that kind of malice, manipulation, or any of that within or ulterior motives in me. I want to believe that other people don't have that. I'm not stupid. I'm just autistic. But I didn't. I
Right.
would not have ever imagined that somebody else could do the things that were done to me, but they were done to me.
Yep.
And because I'm not devious. My mind doesn't work that way. And then even if I would have thought that, oh, you're paranoid. Well, you know what? No, I'm not. This is just what
No.
happened, and it's
No.
because I did trust somebody, and I knew I was coming out of a bad situation. I knew that I had CPTSD. I knew about all this stuff, and by not wanting to fully admit to everything that happened to me, um, or not wanting to fully address it. That was the problem more so than
Right.
anything. But I had wanted that to be addressed for years. That was,
Mm.
I, and so for me, it really is about being able to use my story to move on. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I want them to see that, listen, this is what I overcome. I'm telling you the truth. I don't,
Yeah.
the way things played out, I can't help the way things played out. Having said that, the fact that I'm able to put it all together and make it make sense and even have it make some mathematical sense, and explain a more deeper spiritual concept and more deeper spiritual constructs and more deeper understanding of how we each construct our lives with God prior to each incarnation. Why things work out, because it's not just a solo journey, it is a soul family. And I understand that now. And there are just certain things that I understand that I would not have necessarily understood as fully had I not had that walk through hell that I did. And
Mm.
again, since it has helped expose all that fraud, thank you, God, for giving me the ability. Thank you for giving me the autism. Thank you for giving me the CPTSD. Thank you for giving me all these things that I can prove the evildoers were doing the evil, but all I kept doing was trying to persist
Hmm.
and move on. And I know
Right.
that my last lifetime, I had clocked out early, and it is the same people because I've read this since, and I'm like, oh, I had to pass that mark where I had actually off myself last lifetime because of the same things that Mr. X was doing and the same situation. So when they say, this is what happens when somebody, unalive, I'm like, yeah,
Go
I
back
get
and
it.
break that.
Yeah, and I was already starting to remember some of the people from last lifetime, and then I was realizing, oh my God, this is why so and so has worked in advertising. This is why so and so, why this was happening in Chicago, or why I was having to go over here. And then it was like, oh my God, it really came together and made a
Mm.
picture that like, okay, it was symmetrical, it made sense, and I felt a lot more comfortable in understanding how that and how it's related to art fighting all this, and art and
Mm.
true connection and real emotional connection and real humanity, versus
Right.
calculated stuff, and how we've come to that point again in civilization where we've had to have that one thing versus another. So it's very real that evil, that calculation, that amorality, the
Mm.
greed, all of that, what would be very, very lower behavior and lower vibrational versus humanity, depth of caring, spiritual character, spiritual values. actual values and love being the highest vibration and light, and how that's what we're seeing, all this darkness being exposed. So
Mhm. And I think post experience, having some of the things that you've talked about, you're having to reframe your life completely around that. Well, now belief, doesn't have any maybes anymore. This is a belief
right,
that's rock solid. It doesn't move.
that's it.
And you start running immediately into the stigma machine when you start doing that, because to communicate what's going on, people don't really get it because they haven't had that crossover experience. When you have that crossover experience and you realize how strong and powerful these emotions are,
Yeah,
what the implications of this whole thing are, and the fact that at any minute of any day that portal could reopen, and when it does, that's when everything hits the fan. You have to be able to understand what that is, be calm in the space of that, and then it's really a very immense thing. So when we sit here and talk calmly about these experiences and realize the kind of framing we've gone through to desensitize ourselves to the immensity of it, so we can just sit here and talk, because I think if I were wrapped up in that energy full time right now, we'd be communicating much differently, because I would have all that energy coming through me. You're tied into things. You know what's going on. You almost know what someone's going to say before they're going to say it. You see all these patterns happening around you. You know what's going to happen here, what's going to happen there. You come out, look at somebody, know where they're stuck, know where they're not. I mean, it's such an immensely different kind of thought process. I don't know, integration, what do you want to call it? I don't know.
yeah,
But um you have to be able to, if you can't take the fundamental step and do that God equals yes, not God equals maybe, even coming to terms with some of those concepts is really, really difficult. I got introduced, for example, to Civil War time. What started all this stuff, and it was all this, like, these gears, would turn, and these little black lines from, down at Fort Sumter all the way up to Gettysburg, down to, Sherman's March, and the
right,
whole thing was just like, look how all this happened. Everything's spreading out like these little caterpillar veins, and you're just looking at it and go, oh, okay, that's because nobody stood up for what they needed to stand. That's why all that happened.
yeah,
That's why these things happen. That's why these cycles repeat themselves, and
yes,
it, it's the immensity of the experience can't be understated. So that's why I'm saying the immensity of the damage that these people are doing by pushing this spiritual experience equals pathology mindset, and not allowing the kind of communications that we have been able to do, you and I here, to go on, is incredibly harmful to everybody. And it just really frustrates me. We're still sitting here this far on, and these people still do this. They're still rolling into the courtrooms. I'm seeing more and more just massive pushback against the psych drugs, antidepressants, the
oh
SSRIs in
yes,
particular. Some of the others, people are getting really militant about it. But yet the lion and the forced drugging and the overlaps of language, the spiritual stigma that can get you kidnapped and institutionalized, no joke, that's a problem too. So none of this has been fixed. We're not making any moves in that direction to fix it legislatively. So while we have the rhetoric is picking up, we're still a ways away from the
well,
legislator
well, that's
taking
why I think with that
it's
fraud coming out and the massive amount of money, and I mean massive in the billions,
it is.
easily multi-billions, the fact that this is coming out, uh, and it's coming right straight out of behavioral health, and
Hmm.
that's where the
Oh
rubber's really
yeah,
going to meet the road. That's
it
why I was
is.
glad to see that they had announced, or I think JD Vance is the head of like a task force or fraud investigation force. I'm like, good, please come to Maryland. Look at Sante Group. They are the ones who are a problem, and
Right.
not just in the US, they're an international fraud ring. but they really have done a number in the US. Same thing with WellCare. They're following the same plan and plot point. Now, if only I could get people to realize that all of this is based on Action T4 from Nazi Germany, then we'd really have people
Right.
looking at this and looking at it through that framework, and that's part of why I bring it up. And I'm like, I don't say that lightly, and I certainly don't say it to shock you, but I'm saying because it's the truth, and it
Well,
really
it's
is the
interesting.
exact same playbook.
Yeah. Well, you see, one of our representatives had her office raided, and because she had JFK files and she had the 15% of the MK Ultra files that had not been destroyed, and those
Mm,
were raided. They came, they took them, they got them out of her office. There was no legal basis to do that. They did it anyway. They just said, "We're taking these," and that's it. And that just happened. So I know
yeah.
people are starting to pitch a fit about that, but this notion that we can trust our overlords to do any kind of serious disclosure to the point where things are going to change markedly and quickly, we can forget that. They're never going to do it. Their compromiser mentalities are too set, and they're going to keep doing that. They don't know what it is, that the kind of things that you and I are talking about. They're not even in the ballpark.
That's
So,
that's why I think coming up with our own frameworks, coming up with our own solutions, having them be things that are multi-level, economically viable, much more affordable, cutting out the middleman, cutting out all this pork and this fraud, because it's those
oh
folks
yeah.
that are doing the thieving and the abuse and the lying and the identity theft and all of this stuff. If we're
Mhm.
working in a lateral way and being very DIY about it and doing things that don't involve, massive amounts of drugs and harm and iatrogenic harm, intentional iatrogenic harm.
Right.
Again, that's not only fraud, that's assault. And that needs to stop too. So I think when it's framed in that way, in that context, that we're cutting out billions with a B of fraud, waste, and abuse, and the fact that American citizens are essentially being murdered for blood money in the name of false profits. I think that when people realize, listen, cohabitation, getting all this stuff out of these REITs, which is the real estate investment trust, because it's all Russian and China money
Mhm.
anyway. So it's really, so I say that because it's foreign interests who have generally been hostile toward the United States. Period. Um, and I think if we're going to allow people instead take those billions that are going to the fraud and instead allow people to reinvest in communities, repurpose malls, uh, buy houses again that allow people to be living in them as a small community, allow this in
Mhm.
communities so that, like I was saying, somebody else does, one person does HVAC, somebody else is doing, and make it self-sufficient. Have that be small business based. Get people away from these programs. Nobody wants to be on these damn services. Nobody likes it. It's a trap. Nobody wants to be on it, but you're not providing actual jobs anymore. These corporations have long ago ceased to provide actual jobs that pay a living wage. And now, with all of this now being shifted even more toward AI, this is a scam. This is
Mhm.
a fraud. This is not okay. And it's not capitalism at all. This is not at all capitalism. This is corporate oligarchy, and it's corrupt corporate
It is.
oligarchy. Because capitalism requires that you're giving back to your community. Capitalism requires that you're allowing your workers to be able to afford to buy your own products. Capitalism doesn't rely on corporate welfare. And that's what we've got going on now. And so
We
again, if
do.
we're taking this and breaking everything down in a way that we can say, look, we can DIY. We are the American spirit. We the people can do it ourselves. But you all need to be honest at the top too. You got to get these Wall Street elites out of there. You got to cut out these corrupt corporations. You got to cut out all these black ops. It's got to go. It's got to go, man. It's not doing anybody any good. It's not making us a stronger, healthy country. You want to help make America healthy again, you got to leave it to we the people to do it on our own. We can do it. Give us some fucking credit already. That's what really makes me mad. They want to act like they got all the answers. Well, clearly no. But let those of us who have innovation, let those of us who have had experience in life, and have real spiritual experiences and real stories to tell, help one another, because we can do it.
Mhm.
It
Right.
and we're more than willing to work and set this up and build workable frameworks that make sense, and not just applicable within the US, but Canada and the UK and Australia. It can
Oh,
be
sure.
applied everywhere. And
Hmm.
because this fraud is everywhere. So, let us do this. Let us be the counterbalance, because we do come with good ideas that are sensible and economically viable, and allow for that individuality, spirituality, and real things to come up that aren't based on manipulation, fraud, and ulterior motives. It's not about enriching ourselves. It's about actually building a better tomorrow, building a better world, building a stronger nation. That's what that's about.
It is because when you unleash the kind of happiness and creativity that both you and I were experienced by coming in contact with these forces, which are very real. I mean, with that starts spreading, there's nothing. Everybody would want to move to a society like that.
Yes.
You wouldn't have you. you So but when we realize it doesn't have to be in one place, it can be all over the world. Let's understand what these processes are. Let's just stop the stigma, understand the processes, get those slurs out of my life because I don't want to
Yeah.
hear them ever again from anybody.
Yeah.
I don't. I don't
Same
want to
here.
hear them directed at
Same here.
anyone. I don't want to
Yep.
hear it thrown around.
No.
They're cheap. It's garbage.
Yes, it
There's
is.
so little nuance surrounding those things that all they do is cause trouble, and they are facilitators of a kind of bigotry that nobody needs. I don't need it in my life. You didn't need it in yours. Um, you know, it was enough to reframe around that first experience, and then not then after the pictures, that was a whole nother level of reframing. And then really, I've spent the past 12 years or so going through that reframing exercise around that, still knowing that any moment that thing could happen all over again, and then it's game on. And then talk about that's when the confusion would really hit. So don't want to see that happen.
Yeah.
And I think people just want to ease into this, but it's been curious that there's been so much institutionalized to me it really seems more like an attack. This is not a general, oh, we're going to help you, oops, I made a mistake. This was, it seems like there was just way too many deliberate moves, the cutting of the pain medication,
Right.
the ignoring the legitimate disease I was dealing with, ignoring the fact my feet were broken and taking my shoes away. It
Same.
was the level of systemic dehumanization that just went on from the day I
Yes.
walked in there
Yep.
until the day I went out, and they did not stop trying to push this narrative. You're crazy. You got a problem. You need to
Yep.
be on these things that right now everybody's starting to have this massive pushback and say, why is that? Why are they even on the market?
Right.
With the SSRIs and whatnot. And here they are trying to force people into
Right.
it by conning you, intimidating you, threatening you, and even smearing you to your family members,
Yeah.
whatever it takes to rip your credibility away so they can shove a drug in you. That's what these people do. And they've got the courts in
Yeah.
their pocket to make it easy to do it. This is not, it's a way bigger issue than what we take it and the kind of energy we give to putting a stop to the kind of egregious abuses that anybody with half a brain can see exist within the psych industry. This is what we get for passing laws that say we have to mandatorily fund what's nothing more than a state religion,
Right.
and then on top of that, forcing everyone to buy way too expensive healthcare to
Yeah.
even continue the corporate welfare of subsidizing these people, subsidizing the pharmaceutical industry through the destruction of civil rights. And how we got here, why more people aren't up in arms about it. I think I've never seen this society more apathetic in my life. I think if we had today's society in 1970, we'd still be fighting in Vietnam. It's like this, what happened?
Well,
What happened?
I think we've had a real systematic destruction of the middle class. And I believe
And we
that to
have.
be entirely intentional.
Hmm.
And I think that was sort of baked into a lot of things because it was like they say, war is good business. What
Yep.
got us out of the Great Depression actually happened to be World War II. And it really the middle class was just slowly disappearing anyway, but that's by design. That's by design of Rockefeller. That's by design of all these Gilded Age ghouls and goons. It truly is.
Hmm.
Because even FDR had wanted to have a Citizens Bill of Rights that addressed a lot of these problems that had happened. And what do you think happened to it? Somebody took it and they buried the whole film out in Jersey somewhere.
Sure.
Um,
Gone.
yeah, and I've seen it since, and it would have involved being able to have affordability. It addressed a lot of the issues that have happened
Right.
since. So they knew what they were doing. These folks don't, it's nothing new. And again, they re-imported a lot of the same things that Nazi Germany had exported from places like Hopkins, from the eugenicists here in the
Hmm.
United States, and built upon it. And they brought it back in with Project Paperclip, and they brought it back in with MK Ultra and all the things that preceded that. And that continued. That's why I said, the butcher that was in charge of everything that was happening to me had gone to McGill, so she was very well versed with all this shit. That time I was dead and had the shit beat out of me and everything else. And I came
Hmm.
to in neurology, but it was two doctors from Canada that signed papers saying that I had drug issues. Why? Because Hopkins didn't want to be on the hook. Well, they are on the hook because I remember and I looked into it, and of course, the statute of limitations had happened to run out. And I'm like,
Oh
well,
yeah.
y'all are still going to be held on the hook because it was fraud. She's been doing this in multiple other states. I'm not going to let that go. I don't find it funny, but like I said, I see the deeper connection now between Canada and myself and what was being studied neurologically, as well as the consciousness stuff. I get that now,
Right.
and I'm not uncomfortable with it. In fact, I'm proud. I mean, today I even have on my Tragically Hip t-shirt, so I'm obviously very proud to, have that
Yeah.
as part of what happens with me and part of my larger story. Um, and it matters to me. I would get
Yeah.
very, emotional in talking about that. But it matters to me. So I don't have any I mean, and it was weird too. Like I said, I was handed a weird iPad and just a number of things those have made sense since then. I couldn't put it together then, but maybe I wasn't meant to have the entire full story at that time. It's like they say, when
Right.
you die, you get the knowledge, but maybe you don't get it all at once. Or maybe if because you're still in the same particular meat suit, you're meant to only have it a piece at a time because of the times we are in. Perhaps again, I believe that I definitely know that to be part of what my experience is so that I can explain it in such a way to
Yeah.
have this stuff stopped.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Because
because
it is
people
so
have needed,
immense.
yeah, we've needed to step up to the plate. That's why we're having people like yourself and myself that have had miracle healings, death and near death experiences. That's why it's becoming more and more and more of a groundswell with this, as we're having people like Dr. Gabor Mate and others address the whole trauma thing. Dr. Bessel Vanderkolk, who happens to come out of a
Hmm.
place up in Massachusetts, where, as it turns out, it's just a lot of people that um, I can't go into that part right now, but let's just say that it matters, and I'm glad that I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for
Right.
the things that I've experienced. I'm grateful for what I know. I'm grateful for what I can help put into perspective for other people because I'm an excellent reporter of my own experiences and my own timeline. And
Yeah.
I think that too is what, and because I was trying to report people all along, and I did have a strength of knowledge of knowing what was
Mhm.
going on. Um, it matters. It matters, and that's what's going to really be the a lot of the tipping point. That's why I say I know the FBI won't take my calls because they know what I've been saying is true. And interestingly enough, one time when I called the number, it came up as something about a church, and I thought, oh well, that's odd. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But okay, but I accept that
Uh-huh.
because that kind of said to me, they do know. They do know. They know what's happening. They know this is a much deeper, deeper thing than just the human experience. This is the spiritual experience.
Right.
They know.
And yeah, there are a number of little tiny messages you kind of get on a regular basis,
Yes.
right? And it's not being a schizo, that's just happening. And I'm always dealing in the discernment side because knowing how powerful these emotions are, you have to be able to build that framework to where you stay calm when those things come back in and you have to start interfacing with those emotions again, but they don't waver. They're very direct.
Yeah.
They're so blindingly insightful. I think if a lot of people were walking around with those today, there would be a lot of bizarre conversations going on just because one person is absolutely certain and everybody else is going to be convinced that person was absolutely crazy when they're not, until the things that they start saying start happening and the
Yeah.
things about a person, start coming true, or they can look at a person and tell a whole lot about their past, present, and future if they don't quit doing A, B, C, and D. It's that kind of knowledge. It's that kind of a thing that you have to hold on to and work with, and even the desire to want to use deception has to be gone, completely gone,
Right.
and
Right.
if to enable you to even begin to start assimilating that kind of a thing into your consciousness and expressing it appropriately so people understand what's going on. So it is a huge challenge, and I think when I get disappointed about this whole experience, it's probably disappointed in the amount of time that it's taking to correct these kinds of abuses that have just been normalized very quietly, very slowly over time, normalized in our lives. We're dealing with 150 years, three, four generations of deceit that we're sitting on top of when we talk about our history, what builds economies, what it is about, America that used to make it work versus what is it doing
Right.
today. All that
Right.
stuff has a completely different lens when you know that crossover point is not a fake thing. It's a very real thing.
Yes.
And suddenly, you know, I think if we had that where someone could be incredibly busy just getting people prepared to do that. I talked to
Yes.
some people here who do evangelical work, and they were saying that there's a prophecy of another billion people coming into Christian practice over the next, basically in this time frame sometime. And they
Mhm.
felt like, based on their experience, that you would need one person for every 100 people that were coming in just to help them kind of understand where the baselines are to get, just here's the ropes, A, B, C, D, kind of
Mhm.
help. So, you're looking at 100 million practitioners to get those people, 10 to 100 million practitioners to get those people on board. You know, it's this is what our 17th episode. We spent 17 hours talking about this thing. So you can imagine, and we really haven't even scratched the surface if we were devising a program that would help a person, really do that and walk through it. We probably another 40, 50 hours in front of us, so
Yeah. I think this is where it starts, though, for sure. And here's where I think the technology can obviously be used for good too. So, as many people as use it for bad, anything that can be used for bad can be used for good. And here's where I
Mm-hmm.
think that we are definitely using it for good. And here's where I think it's going to be very helpful in providing something that gives people the opportunity, a springboard to talk about it, a way to be able to help themselves process it by hearing other stories that they can relate to, by knowing that they're not alone with this. And
Right.
that's where I think that kind of networking and community and framework building really comes in.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's hopefully, well, we'll keep at it, won't we? What else can we do? We keep at it, we keep going. We know what the battle is. We know what the opposition is. So I don't
Yeah.
know about you. I just keep throwing that same energy against the same wall because I know that sooner or later that wall is going to fall down. And when that wall falls down, one way or another, I'm going back into that energy, whether it's where I'm
Yeah.
either here and there at the same time or if I just exit and go on. So knowing what that is, knowing how to interface with it, I'm finally free,
Yeah.
that moment will come. I
Yeah.
know that moment's coming and I'm not going to show up at that moment, unprepared. So it's
Right.
a lot of practice. It's more involved than you might think, but I would say once I learned how to do it, it's a lot easier than it probably sounds too.
Yeah,
So,
that's why I try to
um,
really because I know that the fraud is being exposed and a lot of things are going to be crumbling. I don't have fear about that at all because I know what we're talking about and what we're building uh is what's going to be coming next, and I'm here for that.
mhm.
So I'm
Yep.
learning about vibration healing. I'm learning about all the frequencies. So I even have like a little frequency generator that I use now, and I
Yeah.
found it to be very very helpful.
Good deal.
So the more I'm learning about energy and how to apply that toward healing, and how to use that as part of a multi layered wellness practice.
Mhm.
Um, and like I say, for myself, but to apply that for other people too, and to teach people how to do this, and what interpersonal neurobiology is, and what the science behind a lot of these things are. I know that we're coming into a time of telepathy, and again, I'm here for that
Mhm.
because the only thing
Yeah.
I've had to say, or the only thing I've ever been ashamed of, like I said, I want to get freaky with a certain person or people, but they know, and I'm not uncomfortable. So
Right.
what? They
So
know
what?
it's not a big
Right.
deal. I think they knew that anyway,
Yeah.
and to me, it's like that's the only kind of I think secret that I had that in my oh big bad. It wasn't that much of a secret anyway. People that knew me knew that they're like. Nobody's surprised. Well, no, nobody's surprised.
Right.
And now it's like now I kind of understand what that the way that life is constructed, the way energy works, how things are to be your best self, what actually attraction is, what the quantum field is. A lot of this now is making so much
Mm.
more sense, and to be able to explain that in a way that will help people kind of give a practicality to the religious or spiritual experience, and then spiritual experience make more sense to be able to
Right.
say this and this, not this or that, but this and this. And that's why you
Absolutely.
have this, and why your choices matter, and why we have challenges, and it's in overcoming them that we are then ascending. That's why they call it that. When you make your better choices, that means you're moving up always towards that
Yeah.
light love all over again, because that's where we all start from. So it really
Yeah.
is about moving back toward that, and that we're coming into that time of 1,000 years of peace. And how do you prepare for that? And how do you make sure that your inner self is matching up with what's going to be the outer self? Because the more we have that inner peace, like you and I have, the more that
Hmm.
radiates, and the more that spreads. It's like ripples on a pond. And as
Yeah.
we're doing that, that's how Jesus comes back. Jesus comes back through each of us, and in our actions,
Exactly.
our words. And to be able to get people to understand that in a way that is a very practical, workable, viable thing. That's where we're at. So I'm glad to see all the fraud crumbling around this whole behavioral health, that people are seeing it for the nonsense it is, and the false control, the false power, and the concentration camps it is.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
glad of that. I'm sorry we've had to go through, and so many others have had to suffer. But thank you, God, for allowing us to get through the other side so that we can build that helping hand and throw out that rope of saving for other folks to get onto the other side too.
Yeah, yeah, and it's important to say, you know, and we're demanding what we're demanding is nothing that's not promised us already in our
Yes,
Constitution that we're doing our best to wreck. And you know, this notion of God-given rights. It's
that's
not
it.
a fake thing. God-given rights are not a fake thing. They're a real thing.
That's it.
And
Very real.
you know, when you realize that, you know that, you get kind of get a step ahead, and the emotions that you start working with are way more powerful than the ones that you don't use that kind of a mindset with. So, you know, yep, we're just going to keep working at it, keep working at it, try and make that pathway as clear as we can for as many people as we can, and tell you to go out, try it yourself. You don't have to listen to us, but if you want to try it, go ahead. What you're basically doing is trying a framing exercise that anybody with a catastrophic illness who wants to keep their wits about them together is going to be using. Their energy and motion exercises. I learned about it through commonality in that program at Pathways called Renewing Life that was put together that I talked about a few weeks ago. So you
Yeah.
can have these dialogue programs. You can have things where people can start learning how this stuff works. They can learn from each other. They can become more resilient. They can become more happy. They can allow themselves to be spiritually fulfilled and actually, from time to time, even express where all that energy is coming from to another person without being afraid of being kidnapped, hauled away, locked up, threatened, called a schizo, or, you know, electroshocked, or God knows whatever else that these people dream up that you deserve to have for talking like that. So
Yeah.
we'll keep fighting. We're gonna
That's
keep
it.
fighting, I guess is the message. All
We're
right.
gonna win
I
too.
think we about hit our limit for today. Another
Wow.
times fly episode. So
Yeah, they do.
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it
You,
again.
hon. Yes,
I will.
always, always a huge pleasure. I look forward to these every week. Always love talking to you, hon.
Me too.
It's
It's
just a
fun.
huge pleasure, and I feel like we are able to help build that energy and get that out to the world. And it's a beautiful thing.
That's what we're doing. That's
Yep,
what we're about. Thank
that's
you
it.
very much. I will see you next week, Dana. I'm sure we'll be talking in between.
Yep,
Bye bye.
absolutely, Lauren. Have a good one.
You too. Bye bye.
God bless. Bye.